My marriage to Lucas was indeed driven by ulterior motives. At that time, he was a young general who had just achieved military success, while I was the most unruly yet least favored legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's household. My birth mother passed away the day I was born, and from then on, Aunt Mary became the person who treated me best in the world. She was the Empress, the one who could change the Emperor's mind with just a few words. Whenever I had a request, I could directly send a note to her in the palace, and as long as it wasn't too excessive, she would agree. She turned a blind eye to my minor mischiefs before I turned 14, but after I came of age, I made a seemingly ordinary request to her, and for the first time, she got angry.
I won't agree to this. Think carefully. Do you truly like him, or are you acting on impulse?
I've thought it through. I want to marry him.
Yes, I didn't say I liked him, nor was it an impulsive decision. I just wanted to marry him. There was no other reason. I had lived for 14 years, always overshadowed by my half-sister. People in the capital called me arrogant and unruly, a troublemaker, simply because Sophia was praised by everyone, while I, Stella, was nothing. She said she liked Lucas and wanted to marry him. So I decided to try as well. If I succeeded, I could at least have one thing to hold over her, not spending my life with my head bowed.
Aunt Mary, this is the last time I ask you. Please, let me marry him.
There was no question of worthiness or love. Just consider it my youthful desire for a bit of brightness. Aunt Mary's words carried weight. Finally, news came from the palace, and I found myself in Lucas's residence, wearing a red veil, surrounded by red decorations, waiting for someone to lift it. To say I had no expectations would be a lie. After all, a girl only gets to wear the bridal attire once in her life. But that night, I waited until the candles burned out, and Lucas never came.
Madam, the general sent word from the front that he is reeking of alcohol and fears it might affect you, so he will stay in the study tonight.
This was my first encounter with Rose. Rose was a maid in the general's residence, sold to the household at a young age. By the time I arrived, she had become my personal maid.
All right.
Madam?
I sighed. Yes, overnight, I had gone from a young lady to a madam. I was no longer a child. I said nothing, nor did I lift the red veil. I lay down on the bed fully dressed. Early the next morning, I went to the study to find Lucas. When I pushed the door open, he was energetically working at his desk, showing no signs of a hangover.
I can help you, assist you in supporting the second prince.
Early the next morning, I went to the study to find Lucas. When I pushed the door open, he was energetically working at his desk, showing no signs of fatigue.
I can help you.
What can you help me with?
I can help you gain the Prime Minister's support.
His eyes widened in disbelief. The Prime Minister had not yet chosen a side. Everyone thought he was in the Crown Prince's camp, but only the Prime Minister and I knew he supported the Emperor. He would continue to do so until the Emperor passed away and a new ruler took the throne.
All right.
At that time, people in the capital said we were a harmonious couple, but in reality, we were bound by mutual interests. I didn't know then that from that moment on, Lucas would never speak a true word to me again. Convincing the Prime Minister to support the second prince wasn't difficult. Though he didn't like me, he felt guilty. With a bit of manipulation and persuasion, he agreed to fully support the second prince if necessary. Next, we had to create obstacles for the Crown Prince and the fifth prince to highlight the second prince's virtues. I had to act as if nothing was amiss. After all, the Crown Prince's mother was my Aunt Mary. If she discovered my actions, I couldn't imagine the consequences.
I knew you'd be a hindrance. After all, you're just a woman.
I couldn't find words to refute him. Aunt Mary was the only person who treated me well. If I harmed the Crown Prince, I would be completely isolated.
I remember your birthday is in a few days. Is there anything you want?
I looked back at him, his upper body bathed in sunlight, exuding warmth. I watched him smile, his dark eyes sparkling like stars. For a moment, a part of my heart collapsed. I shook my head. Tears threatened to fall, so I quickly left the study. It was enough that someone remembered my birthday. I didn't dare ask for more. Besides, he was only my husband in name and had no obligation to give me gifts.
Madam, you're crying.
Early the next morning, I went to the study to find Lucas. When I pushed the door open, he was energetically working at his desk, showing no sign. That night, Lucas unexpectedly came into my room. The next day, Rose kept searching the bed for something. I adjusted my hairpin and said from the mirror,
Stop looking, there's nothing there.
Last night. Lucas hadn't intended to touch me. Perhaps he hadn't even thought of holding me. He accidentally brushed against my arm and said,
Stella, your body is so cold.
I didn't reply but instinctively moved to the edge of the bed. His tone was neutral, so I didn't want to make him feel cold too. Unexpectedly, Lucas moved closer as well. He might have sighed, or maybe he didn't. I was too nervous to remember clearly because he wrapped his arm around me.
General, it's cold.
I had never been this close to anyone before. It was unsettling. He might have just wanted to warm me with his body heat but found that I couldn't be warmed.
I fell into the water when I was a child.
It was actually Sophia who pushed me, but I didn't plan to tell him that. Let him think I fell in by myself. Otherwise, I couldn't bear his guilt and pity. I watched him in the moonlight. He had closed his eyes, breathing steadily. I wasn't sure if he was asleep. A sudden wave of irritation washed over me.
General, could you please not be kind to me?
He might have really been asleep then because his attitude afterward made me anxious. People said that General Lucas and his wife were in perfect harmony. When Rose mentioned it, I felt a strange, inexplicable sensation. After all, even rumors have some basis in reality. Lucas really did give me a zither because I told him.
I always wanted to learn to play the zither when I was young, but my father never cared.
The next day, Lucas brought a zither and taught me to play it himself. His warm breath by my ear turned half my face red. I still remember the calluses on his long fingers from wielding a sword for years. They felt rough, like they were rubbing against my heart.
Isn't it a good thing that Lucas treats you well? What are you afraid of?
What are you afraid of?
Aunt Mary couldn't understand my anxiety. She never knew that I considered her the closest person in the world. There were things I didn't dare to say and things I didn't dare to do. My arrogance in the first 14 years was just a cover for my insecurity. But when I married Lucas, I never thought I would still feel insecure.
He knows Sophia.
I thought you knew.
Knew what? Knew that Lucas and Sophia were in love?
Then I was the one who came between them, I muttered on the way back to the palace. Rose didn't hear me clearly.
What?
Nothing.
What if, as Aunt Mary said, he was now kind to me because he had transferred his feelings? But reason told me not to hold on to false hope. When I returned to the mansion, Lucas was waiting at the door. The carriage slowly stopped, and he helped me down, then draped a cloak over my shoulders.
It's getting cold. Wear more when you go out.
Yes, after autumn, winter would come. I looked at him. From the first time I saw him until now, his appearance hadn't changed at all.
Lucas, can you hold me?
He sighed. I thought I had misspoken again and was about to make a joke when he pulled me into his arms. The warmth enveloped me instantly. My heart trembled, and tears fell.
Lucas, do you really like me?
I started learning to make clothes. At first, I didn't know Lucas's measurements. So one night, I sidled up to him and wrapped my arms around his body. I thought he was asleep. But as soon as I embraced him, his other arm lifted and rested on my waist.
General?
No response. I looked up and saw that Lucas was sound asleep. His embrace was so practiced, as if he had done it many times before. But I had only shared a bed with him 4 times. I struggled to keep my thoughts in check. Yet, I couldn't help but feel that I had fallen for Lucas. So much so that, despite everything, I persisted in taking his measurements. In my room, I carefully worked on the clothes. Whenever I heard someone approaching, I would quickly hide my work. Even Rose didn't know about it. Lucas spent more time at the residence. Since winter began, the entire household had been on edge. Even Rose said,
Something big is about to happen.
Was it the weather changing, or was it the political climate? I had secretly set traps for the Crown Prince and the 5th Prince. Later, the Emperor fell so ill that he couldn't attend court. While he lay bedridden, he suddenly decreed that the Crown Prince be deposed. Although all of this had been part of my plan, I was completely unaware of it.
The general said he has a surprise for you, madam.
She led me to the garden, where the plum blossoms were already in full bloom. Lucas was sitting in a pavilion in the garden, with a pot of wine in front of him.
Madam, come over here. I got some flower wine from Mr. Smith's house today. Let's drink together.
I stood still, unsure of what to say. I had never been fond of the wine at the residence. I knew he was a general and liked to drink strong liquor when he went to war. To please him, I had tried drinking it too. But when I reached for the second bowl, he took it away from me. Without a word, he turned and left with the wine. At the time, I thought he didn't like me, and by extension, didn't like me drinking his wine. But now, with the flower wine in front of him, inviting me to drink with him, what did it mean? I slowly walked over. Snow began to fall from the sky.
General.
Call me Lucas.
Lucas.
His face lit up with a smile as he handed me a cup of wine.
Try it and see how Mr. Smith's wine tastes. If you don't like it, we'll borrow from someone else next time.
Whether intentional or not, I felt myself falling deeper. Even if it was a perilous cliff. I took the cup and drank it all in one go. Lucas's eyes sparkled, as if waiting for my verdict.
Good wine.
But I was still afraid. I didn't even dare to ask if he liked me. After that snowfall, it didn't snow again for a long time. By the time snowflakes began to fall again, it was the last day of the 12th lunar month. Lucas went to the palace for the banquet as usual, and I stayed at the residence because I didn't want to deal with the insincere women there. A thick layer of snow had accumulated on the ground.
Madam, the red lanterns in the residence have all been lit.
Good. I was about to go back inside when I saw Rose still standing there, so I said, "Go have your meal."
Aren't you going, madam? You haven't eaten anything since noon.
I'm not eating. I can't eat.
I had been feeling uneasy since the afternoon. Now that it was evening, the feeling had intensified. I went inside and lit the candles, then took out the half-finished garment from under the bed. There was also a box under the bed, filled with things Lucas had given me since our marriage 2 years ago. 2 days ago, when I visited the palace, Aunt Mary said,
Why don't you have a child? If you had a child, perhaps you wouldn't be so afraid.
I still remember how my face turned red at that time. Now that I think about it, perhaps she had a point. But I was also afraid. I was afraid that if I became pregnant, Lucas would get close to Sophia again. Thinking this, my cheeks soon felt cold. I put the garment aside and lay on the bed, crying uncontrollably. If I hadn't married Lucas to spite my half-sister, I wouldn't have to worry about falling in love with him. If I hadn't fallen in love with him, I wouldn't have to worry about anyone discovering my cautious affection. Perhaps I would just be an unwanted old maid in the Prime Minister's residence. Though unwanted, I would live freely. I certainly wouldn't be like this, lowering myself more and more into the dust. I wouldn't even dare to ask if he liked me. I resumed working on the garment. I made a silent decision. No matter what Lucas thought, I would give him this garment in the end.
Madam, there's a rebellion in the palace, and our residence is surrounded.
I took a deep breath, hiding my unease, after quickly stashing the garment under the bed.
Let's go. Let's see what's happening.
As soon as we stepped out the door, we were confronted by someone. He waved his hand.
Seize them.
2 guards emerged from either side and pinned me to the ground. I wasn't even given a chance to ask questions.
General?
Early the next morning, I went to the study to find Lucas. When I pushed the door open, he was energetically working at his desk, showing no signs of a hangover.
I can help you, assist you in supporting the second prince.
I never imagined that Lucas had never been loyal to the second prince, but rather to the seemingly unassuming fifth prince. The coup was initially instigated by the second prince, while the fifth prince merely reaped the benefits. He had calculated everything perfectly, including how to incite the second prince's rebellion. I learned all this from the man beside me in the dungeon.
Who are you?
Me? Does it matter who I am? We're all doomed here.
I remained silent, waiting for Lucas to come and explain everything to me personally. But instead of Lucas, I received the news of Aunt Mary's passing. That day, I was half asleep when I overheard 2 jailers whispering.
She drank poison. Blood was coming out of her orifices when she died.
I immediately woke up.
What are you talking about? The Empress is dead?
What Empress? The new emperor has ascended the throne, so she's now the former empress. She took her own life. No one knows where she got the poison from. She died the day after the coup.
I clung to the bars, my hands getting scraped by the rough wood. Aunt Mary was dead.
Well, with the crown prince gone, the empress had no hope left.
How did she die?
I reached out and pressed my hand against the wood, pushing myself into the corner.
The Empress is dead, but don't forget, you're also doomed.
You don't understand.
None of you understand. What did Aunt Mary mean to me? When I was young, the Prime Minister made me wear the clothes of his concubine's daughters, never thinking to buy me anything new. Aunt Mary would secretly send me a piece or 2 of the Emperor's rewards. When Sophia pushed me into the water, everyone in the Prime Minister's residence said I fell in myself. Only Aunt Mary believed me, believed that Sophia had pushed me. Later, when other girls went out with their parents, Aunt Mary knew the Prime Minister was always busy, and my stepmother didn't care for me. She would often organize gatherings or take a group of ladies to enjoy the flowers outside the city, just to give me a chance to go out and play. Once, she even gave me a kite. It was my first toy. I was reluctant to fly it, afraid it would fly away and never come back. But when I brought it back to the residence, Sophia tore it apart. I whipped her with a small leather whip, watching her cry and call for her parents. My stepmother cursed me loudly. The Prime Minister had to come out of his study and said,
"So what if she broke your kite? It's not like you don't have money. Just buy another one. Was it worth hitting her?
But he never understood that it wouldn't be the same kite. Later, I became a notorious figure in the capital, feared and despised by everyone. Only Aunt Mary would look at me with pity every time she saw me.
But I didn't want to be pitted.
I had already put on such a strong front, I didn't need anyone's pity. But I also wanted someone to care for me. Aunt Mary.
Aunt Mary, now that you're gone, what will Stella do?
Lucas is a scoundrel, Aunt Mary. Stella has been in prison for so many days, and he hasn't even come to see me once. Aunt Mary, I really considered it. Maybe I should just love him. I really considered it.
Early the next morning, I went to the study to find Lucas. When I pushed the door open, he was energetically working at his desk, showing no signs of a hangover.
I can help you, assist you in supporting the second prince.
However, I didn't have to face the worst outcome. It seemed he had indeed pleaded for leniency with the emperor. One night, 2 people pulled me out of the prison and stuffed me into a carriage. As we passed by the Prime Minister's residence, I asked them to stop for a moment. I didn't get out of the carriage, I just listened. Inside, the lights were bright, and Sophia was preparing to marry Lucas. The voice of my stepmother sounded content.
Let's go.
The carriage slowly moved on, and I let the curtain fall. The carriage didn't stop until we reached Jiangnan. With the money Lucas gave me, I opened a tea house in Jiangnan. From the beginning, when no one visited, to the end, when it was always full of guests. I had enough spare money to hire a troupe to perform traditional ballads. When I had nothing else to do, I would listen to the performances with the guests. People in Jiangnan said the owner of the new tea house was mute. No one had ever heard her speak a word. Even the matchmakers who came to propose marriage for me gave up when they found out I couldn't speak, or they sought out blind or lame suitors. I refused them all. I didn't dare to trust anyone anymore, nor did I want to burden anyone. They all said I was mute, but no one knew I was just afraid of interacting with people. So I isolated myself from them. The first 2 years were fine. By the 3rd year, I started to fall ill. It began with headaches and later escalated to uncontrollable fits of madness. I went to the clinic to see a doctor, who said it was due to emotional distress.
A heart ailment needs a heart remedy.
There will be no heart remedy.
Later, I closed the tea house. On the morning of the day I closed it, I went to the market and bought several jars of wine, choosing the same strong liquor I first drank at the general's residence. That night, in the dead of night, I started drinking. But after just half a jar, my stomach was already burning.
If Lucas hadn't let me go back then. If I had just ended it all then, would it have been easier?
But there are no ifs in life. I knew I was crying, but I didn't care. I even wondered if I drank all the jars, would I finally find peace? What was the point of someone like me living in this world? I sat in the corner, clutching the jar and drinking, feeling as if I had returned to the first time I drank his wine at the general's residence. Suddenly, he walked over and snatched the jar from me.
Lucas, why did you save me?
Tears blurred my vision, and no matter how hard I wiped them, I couldn't see him clearly. Lucas. The general. I cried hysterically, and eventually, he pulled me into his arms. He seemed to sigh.
Stella, I'm here to take you home.